He was the captain she trusted like a father. But when she discovered his dark secret, he put her in cuffs and left her to die in a storm-swept drainage ditch. He thought she was silenced forever. But he never counted on a grieving Navy SEAL. And he sure as hell never counted on his loyal German shepherd, Judge, who found her in the dark and would tear the world apart to protect her. The flatlands of western Michigan weren't ancient, but they were vast, a sprawling patchwork of cornfields and dense woods that could swallow secrets whole. Far below, the town of Cedar Creek hummed with the quiet energy of a Midwestern autumn, a small pocket of civilization nestled in the immense wilderness. But up here, 10 miles down a winding, unforgiving gravel track optimistically named County Road 4, silence was king. The air was thin and crisp, smelling of damp earth, pine, and the promise of a coming winter. It was a good place to grieve. Cole Reaper Warren stood on the wide wooden porch of the farmhouse, a mug of bitter black coffee in his hand. At 34, Cole was a man built of lean, functional muscle and the intense stillness that had defined his profession. His movements were economical, his deep-set gray eyes observant, missing nothing. He was a senior chief in the United States Navy SEALs, a professional warrior. But here, in the civilian uniform of a flannel shirt and worn jeans, he was just Cole, a man on family leave. At his feet, breathing softly, was Judge. Judge was a magnificent sable German shepherd, his body a perfect specimen of power and intelligence. His dark, soulful eyes tracked Cole's every move. Judge had belonged to Mac Connolly, Cole's mentor and godfather in the teams. Now, after Mac's sudden death 6 weeks ago, Judge belonged to Cole. The dog was a living, breathing link to the man who had taught him how to be a soldier, and more importantly, how to be a good man. Cole's gaze drifted past the porch rail to the cluttered living room visible through the glass door. Cardboard boxes were stacked in precarious towers, filled with the artifacts of a life fully lived. Mac Connolly. The man had been a legend, one of DevGru's founders, tough as treated oak, with a booming laugh that could rattle windows. His death hadn't come from a bullet or a blast, but from a massive heart attack on this very property. It felt like a clerical error of fate, a betrayal of the man's formidable legacy. Cole was here to sort through that legacy, a task that felt heavier and more complicated than any rucksack. He picked up a framed photo from the dusty mantelpiece. Mac, grinning, his arm around a much younger, leaner Cole at his Bud/S graduation. "You're a thinker, Reaper," Mac used to say, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Don't let the job grind that quiet part of you away. You'll need it when the shooting stops." Cole looked at the boxes, the silent weight of the task pressing down on him. He was supposed to sort, to decide what went to charity, what to storage, what was simply trash. But every object, a worn climbing rope, a dog-eared copy of Moby Dick, a wall map bristling with red pins, felt like a piece of the man himself. How could he throw any of it away? The wind picked up, whistling hard through the eaves. The sky, a pleasant clear blue in the morning, had bruised to a sick, greenish purple in the west. A heavy stillness fell over the woods, the kind that comes just before nature unleashes its fury. The forecast had warned of a significant weather event, which Cole thought grimly was one hell of an understatement. By 4 p.m., the world outside the farmhouse had dissolved into a roaring gray chaos. This wasn't just rain. It was a horizontal deluge, hammering the wooden walls like handfuls of gravel. The wind didn't just howl, it screamed. A living entity was besieging the small, sturdy farmhouse, testing it for weakness. Cole checked his smartphone. No signal. The landline on the wall, a rotary relic Mac had kept for nostalgia, was dead. He flicked the main lights. They sputtered, flashed, and died, plunging the room into profound darkness. A second later, the heavy-duty generator Mac had installed kicked on with a low, throaty roar from the shed outside. But Cole knew it didn't matter. They were cut off. That gravel road would now be an impassable river of mud. Judge, who had been sleeping by the cold fireplace, rose with a low whine, his ears pinned flat against his skull. He paced the living room, his claws making anxious clicking sounds on the hardwood floor. He was a trained K-9, accustomed to the chaos of helicopters and gunfire. But this was different. This was the raw, untamed power of nature, and it unnerved him. "Easy, boy," Cole murmured, scratching the thick ruff of fur on the dog's neck. "It's just noise. We're safe in here." But Judge wouldn't settle. He paced for hours as the storm reached its crescendo, the farmhouse groaning under the assault. It was just after 9 p.m. when it happened. In mid-stride, Judge froze. He stood rigid in the center of the room, his head cocked, a low rumble building in his chest. "What is it, Jay?" Cole asked, his voice low, his body instantly alert. Judge ignored him. He bolted for the heavy front door, barking. This wasn't the territorial bark of a dog sensing a raccoon or a stray cat. It was a series of short, frantic barks, a sound of deep distress, almost human in its appeal. He clawed at the solid oak door, his thick nails splintering the wood, then ran back to Cole, barked once, and charged the door again. All right, I get it. Cole was already moving. He grabbed his heavy rain slicker from the mudroom and a high-powered, waterproof flashlight. This wasn't a drill. Judge was a working dog. He never gave a false positive. Cole wrenched the door open and was hit by a solid wall of wind and water. It took his breath away. Judge, show me, find. The dog launched off the porch like a sable rocket, a shadow swallowed instantly by the night. Cole followed, the beam of his flashlight cutting a weak, struggling cone into the deluge. The gravel drive was gone, replaced by a knee-deep, churning brown stream. The wind roared in his ears, ripping at the hood of his slicker. Judge, where? The dog's barks were incessant, their frantic pitch coming from somewhere down the main embankment. Off the road. Cole slid down the muddy bank, his boots finding no purchase. He grabbed at roots and rocks to slow his descent. The roar of the storm was deafening, but underneath it, his trained ears caught something else. The faint metallic ticking of a cooling engine and the steady drip of a liquid that wasn't rain. He rounded a large boulder and the beam of his flashlight hit it. His blood ran cold. It was a Cedar Creek Police Department patrol car, upside down, its roof crumpled like paper against a cluster of ancient, unmovable oaks. It had clearly rolled several times. Judge, search, Cole commanded, his voice pure instinct as his SEAL training took over. He slid the rest of the way down, landing hard beside the wreck. The driver's side window was shattered. He shone his light inside. He saw a hand, pale and still, pinned under the dash, but Judge was on the other side of the wreck, whining and nudging at a figure that had been thrown clear. Cole scrambled over the slick, distorted hood. It was a female police officer. Jenna Riley, the nameplate read, visible on her mud-caked vest. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair matted to her face by the rain. She lay twisted at an impossible, unnatural angle, her uniform torn, her skin stark white in his harsh flashlight beam. Cole knelt beside her, his fingers immediately finding the carotid artery in her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, thready, and far too fast. Then he saw it. The flashlight beam illuminated a dark, spreading stain on her thigh, just below the hip. Her duty belt was gone, and her pants were ripped. She was bleeding heavily. He didn't need to see the wound to know what it was. Femoral artery. She was bleeding out, fast. He looked up the hill. The road was 50 yards away. An impossible climb while carrying someone. The storm was screaming. The generator at the farmhouse was miles from any neighbor. He was alone. Judge, watch her. Cole snapped. He ripped off his rain slicker, his fingers fumbling in the cold for the one item he always carried. A habit Mac had drilled into him. A-C-A-T, tourniquet. Hang on, officer, he muttered, his voice swallowed by the wind as he knelt in the mud to save her life. You're not dying tonight. The world shrank to the small, intense circle of Cole's flashlight. There was no storm, no woods, no future. Just the wound and the blood pumping out in a catastrophic, rhythmic surge. Jenna Riley was seconds from death. Judge, watch, Cole ordered. The dog stood rigid, his body a shield between the woman and the dark woods, his eyes scanning the tree line. Cole's hands, trained by thousands of hours of repetition in sand, water, and simulated fire, moved with brutal, life-saving efficiency. He tore the C-A-T tourniquet from its belt pouch. He placed it high and tight on her thigh, using his own knee on her hip for leverage. He fed the strap through the buckle, pulled it mercilessly tight, and twisted the windlass. He ignored the mud, the driving rain, and the unconscious woman's faint groan of protest. He twisted until the flow of blood slowed, then stopped, becoming a dark, sluggish ooze. He secured the rod and wrote the time on the white strap with the marker he always kept. 21:07. He didn't celebrate. This was just the first step. The tourniquet had bought her time. Maybe 2 hours, maybe 4. But it had cost her a leg, or a very high chance of losing it. Now, with the immediate threat of her bleeding out controlled, his training shifted to the next phase, the secondary assessment. He ran his hands quickly over her body, checking for other, less obvious injuries. His fingers found the damp, torn fabric on her left side, just above her hip. He brought the flashlight closer. It was a gunshot graze. The rain had washed away most of the blood, but the angry red furrow and the scorched edges of her uniform were unmistakable. Someone had shot her. Then, as he steadied her arm to check for a pulse at her wrist, his thumb slid across her skin. He frowned, pulling back the soaked sleeve. Dark, swollen purple welts circled her wrist, matching the exact shape and pattern of handcuffs. They were fresh. He checked the other wrist. The same. She hadn't been driving. She'd been a prisoner in her own car. Rage, cold and sharp, cut through his professional focus. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a chase gone wrong. This was an execution. "We're moving, now." He said it to Judge, who whined in understanding. Gently, but with an almost mechanical strength, Cole lifted the officer into his arms. The climb was a nightmare. The 50-yard embankment, which he'd slid down in seconds, was now a vertical wall of slick mud and loose rock. He couldn't use his hands. They were full. He had to rely on his legs and core, digging his boot heels in, using his knees to push off roots he could barely see. The woman was light, but she was a dead weight. And with every upward lurch, he could feel her body shudder, her head lolling against his chest. He moved upward, one agonizing step at a time, the storm fighting him, the wind trying to peel him off the slope. Judge scrambled ahead, pausing every few feet to look back, his barks lost in the gale. After an eternity, he hauled himself and his burden over the edge onto the flooded gravel road. He didn't rest. He adjusted his grip and started the quarter-mile uphill trek to the farmhouse, his legs burning, his lungs on fire. He was racing the clock on the tourniquet. When he finally burst through the farmhouse door, he didn't stop in the mudroom. He went straight into the main living area, past the cold fireplace, and into the first-floor bedroom that had been Mac's. He gently laid her on the old quilt-covered bed, her form small and broken against the antique wood. "Judge, door," he commanded. The dog sat by the bedroom door, facing out, a silent sentinel. Cole switched on the battery-powered lantern on the nightstand, flooding the room with harsh white light. He took Mac's old hunting knife from its sheath on the wall and with practiced care, began cutting away the wet, mud-caked uniform. He had to see the full extent of the damage. He cut away the pant leg, exposing the tourniquet and the mangled wound beneath it. It was bad, but it wasn't his primary concern. He cut away her shirt, revealing the graze wound on her side. It was clean. No exit wound, just a long, deep furrow. She'd been lucky. He found the first aid kit Mac kept in the closet, a far more comprehensive setup than the one on his belt. He cleaned the graze, packed it with gauze, and wrapped her torso. He checked the tourniquet one last time. It was holding. He covered her shivering, exposed body with several thick wool blankets, tucking them in tightly. He had done all he could. Now it was up to her. He sat in the bedside chair for nearly an hour, watching the uneven rise and fall of her breathing. It was just after 10 p.m. when her eyelids fluttered. They opened, revealing dark honey-colored eyes, wide and unfocused. They darted around the rustic room, the mounted deer head on the wall, the lantern, the unfamiliar ceiling, before they landed on him. Her body went rigid with terror. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. She tried to sit up, a movement that sent a jolt of agony through her body. She gasped and fell back, her eyes wild. "Where am I? What happened?" "You're safe," Cole said, keeping his voice low and calm. He held up his hands, palms out. "My name is Cole. You're in my cabin. I found you down the embankment. Your patrol car. It crashed." "My car?" She looked down at the thick blankets, her brow furrowed in confusion. I don't remember a crash." She tried to move her leg and her face went white. I can't feel my leg." "You were hurt badly," Cole said, choosing his words carefully. "You were bleeding. I had to stop it. An ambulance can't get up here." The storm washed out the road. "Jenna," she said, the word a sudden breath. My name is Jenna. I'm a police officer." That she knew. But as she looked at him, at the strange room, her terror only mounted. "I don't remember you. I don't remember any of this. Why can't I remember?" "It's okay," Cole said, his voice a steady anchor in her sea of panic. "You have a head injury. It's temporary." Just then, Judge, sensing the shift in the room, moved from the doorway. He walked slowly to the side of the bed and pushed his big head under Jenna's outstretched hand, whining softly. Jenna flinched, then instinctively stroked his fur, her fingers tangling in his thick ruff. "And this is Judge. He's the one who found you." Seeing the dog, a creature of pure, unambiguous loyalty, seemed to break her panic fever. Her breathing slowed. She was still terrified, but the wildness in her eyes faded, replaced by a deep, exhausted confusion. He found me, she repeated, her gaze fixed on the dog. Get some rest, Jenna, Cole said gently. You're safe here. I promise. I need to go check on something. Judge will stay with you. She nodded, her eyelids already drooping, her hand still resting on the dog's head. Cole pulled his slicker back on and grabbed the flashlight. He had to be sure. He stepped back out into the storm, the wind nearly ripping the door from his hand. He slid back down the embankment to the crumpled wreck. The storm hadn't let up. This time he wasn't a rescuer. He was an investigator. He moved to the front of the vehicle. The engine was cold. He shone his light into the cabin. He saw the empty bracket on the dash where the police radio should have been. It wasn't broken. It had been unclipped and removed. He moved to the tires. The driver's side front tire was shredded, but not from a rock. He found the hole, a perfect .45 caliber entry point in the sidewall. He checked the rear tire. The same. Cole Nolan stood up, the freezing rain doing nothing to cool the cold certainty settling in his gut. The handcuff bruises, the graze wound, the removed radio, the shot-out tires. This was a setup, a planned assassination meant to be disguised as a tragic accident in the storm. Whoever did this had left her for dead. And when they found out she wasn't, they would be back to finish the job. He looked up the hill toward the small, warm light of the farmhouse. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was an isolated, indefensible position, and he was standing between a wounded, helpless woman and a team of killers who thought they'd already gotten away with it. The storm broke with the dawn, but the silence that followed was just as isolating. The world outside the cabin window was an unrecognizable landscape of ruin. The wind was gone, but the rain still fell, a cold, steady drizzle that promised to keep the creek bed swollen, and the gravel road an impassable river of mud. The only sounds were the persistent rain, the crackle and pop of the fire Cole had built in the hearth, and the low, mechanical hum of the generator from the shed, a constant reminder of their separation from the civilized world. For 3 days, they existed in this suspended reality. Cole Warren, the warrior, became the caretaker. His movements were precise, gentle, and deeply focused. He was in a new kind of fight, a battle against infection, shock, and the clock. The tourniquet was a constant, agonizing problem. He knew he couldn't leave it cinched. Every 2 hours, he had to perform a controlled reperfusion, a careful loosening of the windlass to allow a trickle of blood back into the oxygen-starved limb. A process designed to save the leg, but one that brought on waves of excruciating, white-hot pain. Jenna, she clung to that name, the one solid piece of her identity, would brace herself, her knuckles white as she gripped the bedsheets. Cole would talk her through it, his voice low and even. Okay, Jenna, on my count. Breathe with me. 3, 2, 1. Now. She would scream into the pillow, a muffled, desperate sound as fire shot down her nerves. And through it all, Judge would stand by the bed, whining softly, nudging his head under her hand as if to absorb the pain himself. Her body was a prison. The graze wound on her side was a constant, throbbing reminder of an act of violence she couldn't recall. But it was the blank space in her mind that truly terrified her. She knew her name. She knew she was a cop in Cedar Creek. She knew instinctively how to field strip a Glock she no longer had. But the why was gone. Why was she in that car? Why was she in cuffs? Who had tried to kill her? The questions circled in her mind, a carousel of nameless horror. Cole brought her broth, water, and pain medication. He never pushed, never interrogated. He simply existed, a quiet, capable presence that was both unnerving and deeply reassuring. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, yet his hands were surprisingly gentle as he checked her dressings. On the afternoon of the third day, the rain finally eased. Jenna was propped up on pillows, sipping water. Judge was asleep, his heavy head resting on the edge of her mattress. He doesn't leave, she whispered, her voice still hoarse. She'd been staring at the dog for an hour. Cole looked up from the fire he was tending. He's a shepherd. It's what they do. They need a flock. Right now, you're the flock. He's a good boy, she said, stroking the dog's soft ears. He belonged to your friend. Cole paused, the iron poker still in his hand. He nodded, his gaze distant, settling on the stacked boxes in the living room. His name was Mac. He was my mentor in the teams. He gestured with the poker to a picture on the mantel Jenna couldn't quite make out. Taught me everything. How to shoot, how to lead, how to live. Is that why you're here? Because of him? He passed 6 weeks ago. Heart attack on a trail just north of here. This was his farmhouse. Cole set the poker down. The sound of metal on stone echoed in the quiet room. I'm here to pack up his life. Judge was his. Now I guess he's mine. We're sort of figuring each other out. It was the most he'd said at one time. Jenna saw the grief in him, a quiet, disciplined sorrow that mirrored her own confusion. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man in mourning. I'm sorry, she said softly. He nodded, accepting the words. What about you, Jenna? You said you were a cop. What do you remember? She frowned, trying to grasp at the fragments. The precinct. The smell of old coffee and disinfectant. My locker. Number 221B. My partner. Sarah. I remember her laugh. She paused. A newer, colder feeling surfaced. And I remember feeling alone for the last few months. Alone how? Like I was on the outside. She struggled to explain. It was a feeling. Like in the briefing room. The jokes would stop when I walked in. Guys I'd known for years suddenly wouldn't meet my eye. I thought I was just being paranoid. I thought. Her mind's eye drifted to a kind, fatherly commanding face. I even talked to my captain about it. Frank Donovan. Donovan? Cole asked, his voice neutral. Captain Frank Donovan, she repeated, a flicker of warmth in her voice. He's the best of us. An old school cop. Kind eyes, always knew the right thing to say. He's the reason I joined the force. He was my dad's partner years ago. He told me I was imagining things, that I was a good cop, and to just keep my head down. She sighed, the memory fading. He said he'd look into it. Sounds like a good man, Cole said, watching her carefully. He is, she said, settling back against the pillows. He was the only one I thought I could trust. The exhaustion of the conversation pulled her under, and she drifted into a restless sleep. Cole watched her. He knew that isolation. It was the feeling a SEAL gets when he realizes a local ally has turned. The feeling that comes just before the ambush. Jenna wasn't being paranoid. She'd been prey, and she'd known it. The nightmare started 2 hours later. It began with a whimper, a small, animal sound. Jenna's head began to turn on the pillow, her breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. No, please, no. Cole was at her side instantly. Jenna, wake up. You're dreaming. But she was gone, trapped behind her own eyes, reliving the moments the rain had washed away. She was in the car, rain hammering the roof, the dome light flickering, the smell of wet wool and ozone. She was in the back seat, cuffed. What's happening? She heard her own voice say. The driver's side door opened. A figure in a black rain slicker leaned in. I'm sorry, kid. You just wouldn't let it go. No, please don't, she moaned, her sleeping body writhing. Judge was on his feet, barking, sensing the profound terror in the room. The man in the dream leaned closer. The flashlight from his vest illuminated his own face, the kind eyes now cold and empty. He unclipped the radio from his belt and tossed it onto the seat. He drew his service weapon. Jenna, wake up. Cole gripped her shoulders, shaking her. Her eyes flew open. She screamed, a raw, terrified sound of pure betrayal. Frank. She stared at the wooden ceiling, her whole body shaking violently. Frank, why? Jenna, you're here. You're safe, Cole said, his voice firm, trying to cut through the horror. She focused on him, her honey-colored eyes wide with a terrible new clarity. The blank space was gone. It had been filled. He had a gun, she whispered, her voice trembling. It was raining. He cuffed me. He shot out the tires. She grabbed Cole's shirt, her hand a desperate vice. It was him, the man I trusted, Captain Frank Donovan. He tried to kill me. The fluorescent lights of the Cedar Creek Police Department's main briefing room hummed, a harsh, sterile sound that was the antithesis of the farmhouse's wind-blown silence. It was 7 a.m., 3 days after the storm hit. At the podium stood Captain Frank Donovan, a man who commanded a room not with volume, but with presence. He was in his late 50s with iron-gray hair, a neatly trimmed mustache, and the kind, steady eyes that made rookies want to trust him and veterans respect him. He wore his uniform with the crisp precision of a man who believed in the institution. He looked out at the assembled day shift officers, his face a mask of disciplined sorrow. As many of you know, he began, his voice low and commanding. The storm 3 nights ago was one of the worst this county has seen in a decade. Roads washed out, power is down, and communications are spotty. It is with a heavy heart that I must confirm that Officer Jenna Riley, who was on patrol in a high-risk rural sector, is officially missing. A murmur went through the room. Officers shifted in their hard plastic chairs. Her patrol car, Donovan continued, has been located by its dispatch signal near County Road 4. The area is inaccessible due to a complete washout. We have to assume the vehicle was compromised and swept away. He paused, letting the weight of the implication settle. Jenna. She was a fine officer, one of our best. We are mobilizing a full search and rescue operation in coordination with the State Highway Patrol. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the room. We will find her. Dismissed. The room broke up, officers speaking in low, somber tones. But Donovan remained at the podium, his expression unreadable. He waited until the last officer had left before turning. Slater, Gable, my office, now. Two men detached from the departing crowd. Officer Rick Slater was a man in his late 30s with a military buzz cut and the flat eyes of a man who had seen too much and felt too little. He was Donovan's muscle, an ex-MP with a reputation for cold efficiency. Trailing him was Officer Mike Gable, a younger, paler man who always looked like he was sweating, constantly wiping his damp palms on his trousers. Gable was in over his head and he knew it. They entered Donovan's office and the captain shut the door. The benevolent warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp authority. That briefing was for them, Donovan said, moving to the large map on his wall. This is for you. He tapped the map just above the coordinates for County Road 4. The storm was a gift. It provided the cover we needed, but it also made a mess. The car is in the ditch, but I have no visual confirmation. You want us to go up there, Captain? Slater asked, his voice flat. I need you up there, Donovan corrected, his voice like chipped ice. I need you to find her, and I need you to find the evidence package she was carrying. The package she was supposed to log in 3 days ago. I don't have to tell you what happens if that package surfaces. Gable swallowed hard, his face ashen. But Captain, the roads are washed out. Search and rescue. You are not search and rescue, Donovan snapped, his eyes flashing with a sudden dangerous intensity that made Gable flinch. You are sanitation. You will take the department ATV, go up the old logging road, and you will get to that wreck. You will confirm she is done and you will find that package. Do you understand? Slater simply nodded. Understood, Captain. Good. Go. And Rick, Donovan added as Slater opened the door. No survivors. Not this time. It took them 2 hours on the treacherous, slick logging road. The ATV whined in protest, but Slater drove it with a reckless skill. They parked a quarter-mile away and walked in, the air thick with the smell of wet pine and decay. They found the crumpled, overturned patrol car just as Cole had. Jesus. Gable breathed, looking at the wreck. There's no way she survived that. Slater said nothing. He slid down the embankment, his boots sinking deep in the mud. He moved with the focus of a predator, his eyes scanning every detail. He saw the tracks. She's not in the vehicle, he called up. What? Gable scrambled down after him, nearly falling. She must have been thrown clear. She's got to be around here somewhere. Jenna, Officer Riley. Shut up, you idiot, Slater hissed. He pointed. Look. In the mud, partially obscured by a fallen branch, were footprints. Not the small, panicked tracks of a wounded woman, but the deep, waffle-stamped impressions of heavy-duty tactical boots. And beside them, the four-toed prints of a large dog. She wasn't alone, Slater knelt. His eyes scanned the ground where Cole had knelt. He saw the discarded paper wrapper from a field dressing, but then his fingers touched something else. A small, square vacuum-sealed piece of olive drab plastic. He pulled it from the mud. It was the wrapper for a C.A.T. tourniquet, a combat application tourniquet. Military issue. She's alive, Slater said, his voice a low growl. And she's got help. Professional help. He stood and pulled out his radio. Gable, search the car for the package, now. He switched the radio to Donovan's private channel. Captain, we have a situation. The asset is gone. The vehicle is empty. Back in his office, Frank Donovan's blood ran cold. He gripped the receiver. What do you mean, gone? She was taken, Slater's flat voice crackled. We found drag marks and footprints, big ones, and a dog. Also found this wrapper for a military tourniquet. Whoever she's with, he's a soldier and he knows what he's doing. Donovan was silent. He stared at the framed photo on his desk, a younger him, arm in arm with Jenna's smiling father, both in uniform. A soldier. This changed everything. This wasn't a loose end. This was a new war. Fall back, Slater. Fall back now. Get out of there. He cut the transmission, his mind racing. He couldn't send cops. A soldier would eat them for breakfast. He needed eyes. He picked up his personal cell phone and dialed a number not listed in any police directory. "It's me," Donovan said. "There's a complication with our problem in the sticks. It's active and it's hostile. I need eyes in the air, now. Unmarked civilian. Old logging camp on County Road 4. Find them." He hung up. The mask of the venerable captain was gone. This was the man who had ordered the execution of a rookie, and he would not fail a second time. Back at the farmhouse, the steady drumming of rain finally stopped. A weak, watery sun broke through the clouds, illuminating a world washed clean and broken. Cole stood on the porch watching steam rise from the forest floor. Jenna was sleeping, the fever from a looming infection finally responding to the antibiotics from Mac's comprehensive medical kit. He felt the sound before he heard it. A low, rhythmic vibration in the floorboards. Then it reached his ears. Whump whump whump. He scanned the sky. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of a life flight helicopter or the heavy thud of a National Guard Black Hawk. It was the familiar chop of a Bell 206, a civilian bird. It came over the southern ridge, flying low and dangerous. It wasn't searching in a grid pattern. It was flying the contour, following the curves of the land, its nose down, hunting. It banked hard, passing almost directly over the farmhouse, close enough for Cole to see the helmeted silhouette of the pilot. In that instant, the caretaker vanished. The man on leave was gone. Senior Chief Reaper Warren took control. His eyes went flat, his posture shifted. He watched the helicopter disappear over the next ridge, knowing it was making a turn. It would be back. He moved inside, his steps silent. He checked the deadbolt on the heavy oak door. He moved to the windows, checking the thick wooden storm shutters Mac had installed. He saw the room not as a home, but as a defensible position, a firebase. He went to the large steel gun safe in the corner of the living room, half hidden behind a stack of boxes. He had Mac's combination. His fingers worked the dial. The lock clicked open. He swung the heavy door wide, revealing a rack of well-oiled, highly effective tools. He wasn't a civilian anymore. He was a SEAL, and the enemy was at the gate. The sound was a predator's heartbeat. Whump. 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 It vibrated through the farmhouse's timber walls, a low thrumming Cole felt in his teeth before his ears could place it. It was the civilian helicopter, and it was back, this time flying a tighter, more deliberate pattern to the north, working its way south. They were being hunted. Cole turned from the window, his movements now devoid of all civilian hesitation. He was no longer Mac's grieving friend. He was Senior Chief Warren. He reached into the open gun safe and his hand moved with familiar reverence over cool, oiled steel. He pulled out Mac's prize, a lever action. 30-30. It was a woodsman's rifle, reliable and powerful, but it wasn't what he was looking for. His fingers moved past it, searching for the cold, familiar angles of a modern weapon. There, a semi-automatic rifle, a high-end civilian or platform chambered in .556, that Mac had evidently kept for competition. Cole pulled it out, tested its weight. It was balanced. He found 4 30-round magazines and began methodically checking them. The metallic click-click-click of round seating was the only sound in the room. He worked with a terrifying, quiet economy of motion. His face was a mask of cold focus. "Cole." Her voice was a thin, reedy whisper from the bedroom. The rhythmic pulse of the helicopter grew louder, echoing off the ridges, and it had woken her. She was trying to sit up, her face pale, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. She was looking at his hands, at him loading the weapon. "It's nothing," he said, his voice flat, not looking up. "Just checking inventory. Go back to sleep." That's not a hunting rifle," she stammered, her gaze fixed on the black rifle. The sound of the helicopter grew immense, passing almost directly overhead. Whump. 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 It was loud, oppressive, shaking the very air in the room. That sound, combined with the sight of Cole preparing for war, was the final, brutal key. The last remaining fragments of her memory, which had been flickering at the edge of her mind like a damaged film, suddenly slammed into place. The blank space in her mind didn't just fill, it detonated, flooding her with a cold, clear, horrifying deluge of detail. She remembered the smell of the impound lot at night, the metallic tang of diesel and rust. She'd only been on the force for 3 years, but she was her father's daughter, a born investigator. She had noticed the discrepancies. Simple clerical errors, Donovan had called them. Patrol cars seized in drug busts, logged for auction, but still showing up on the active impound list weeks later. Cars that, according to the books, were racking up storage fees when they should have been sold. It was a loose thread. She'd pulled it. She remembered the night before the storm. She'd gone to the lot after her shift, using her old access code. She'd found Slater and Gable, two of Donovan's most loyal officers, in the back corner of the lot, hidden from the main security cameras. They weren't checking inventory. They were using a crowbar to pry open a hidden compartment in the trunk of a wrecked patrol car. They were pulling out plastic-wrapped bricks of drugs and transferring them to the trunk of an unmarked civilian sedan. She hadn't confronted them. She had slipped away, her heart hammering. She had gone to her small apartment, her hands shaking so badly she could barely type. She had accessed the impound lot's secondary camera feed, a blind spot she'd discovered during a previous case, from her personal laptop. And she had recorded it all. 20 minutes of high-definition footage showing Donovan's trusted men committing a federal crime. She had downloaded it, encrypted it, and saved it to a single, unremarkable thumb drive, which she tucked into a small, waterproof evidence bag. The evidence package Donovan was now hunting for. The memory of the next morning was the sharpest. Donovan had called her into his office. Not Slater, not internal affairs, just him. She remembered the steam from his coffee mug, the benevolent smile on his face as he told her to close the door. "You're a good cop, Jenna," he'd said, his voice full of warmth. "Smart, like your father." He knew. He had to have known. "Heard you were working late," he'd continued, steepling his fingers, taking a particular interest in the impound lot. And then he'd laid it out, not as a crime, but as a philosophy. He called it pragmatic policing. The drugs were going to get in anyway. Why not control the flow? Why not use the proceeds to fund off-the-books operations the city council would never approve? He wasn't just a dirty cop. He was a zealot. He wasn't threatening her. He was recruiting her. "You're either in, Jenna," he'd said, his smile never faltering. "Or you're out. Think about it." She remembered her own voice, cool and clear. "I can't do that, Captain." "I was afraid you'd say that, kid." He had sighed. The trap was set. The next day, he assigned her a solo patrol, a welfare check on the high rural road just hours before the storm was due to hit. A pointless route. He had called her, said he was at a disabled vehicle, that he needed her help, and she had gone because he was Frank Donovan, and she trusted him. She remembered the rain, his black slicker, the cold click of the handcuffs. "For your own safety, kid," he'd said, his voice flat, all the warmth gone. Then he'd pulled his gun. He tried to recruit me," Jenna whispered, the words tearing from her throat. Cole stopped loading and looked at her, the terror in her eyes gone, replaced by the hollow, broken look of profound betrayal. "Donovan," she said, her voice shaking, "he's running drugs, using the seized patrol cars. I found out. I had proof. A video." She was sobbing now. Racking gasps that shook her entire frame. "He didn't just try to kill me because I was a cop. He tried to kill me because I wouldn't become one of them. He was my father's partner, Cole. He held me at my father's funeral. He gave me his badge." The sound of the helicopter was fading. It had passed over, moving to the next section of the county. It was a search pattern. They were being systematic. They hadn't found them yet, but they would. Jenna's breakdown was complete. It wasn't just the fear of dying. It was the poisoning of her entire life. The realization that her mentor, her hero, was a monster. "He's going to find us, isn't he? He's not going to stop." Cole finished seating the last round. He slammed the magazine into the rifle with a resonant thwack. He stood, not as a caretaker, but as a guardian. He went to the main living room window, took hold of the heavy wooden storm shutter, and slammed it shut. He dropped the thick crossbar into place, plunging the room into a safe, premature dusk. He did the same with the kitchen window. The farmhouse was now a reinforced box. He returned to the bedroom doorway, the rifle held at a low ready. He looked at her, his gray eyes clear and utterly calm. "Yes, he's coming," he said, his voice devoid of fear. "But he's not coming for a lost rookie anymore. He's coming for me." He nodded toward the front door where he had begun assembling a small collection of Max hunting and climbing gear. "That helicopter is just for show. They'll send Slater and his team in on the ground. They're cops and they're trained, but they're sloppy. They left you alive and they left me a trail to follow." He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the man they called Reaper. "This isn't a city street, Jenna. This is the country. This is my territory. They don't know the game trails. They don't know the sight lines. They don't know about the gully to the west or the deer run that doubles back." He chambered around, the sound a final, definitive promise. They're stepping into my world now, and I never leave a teammate behind. The sun set behind the western tree line, painting the bruised clouds in violent shades of purple and orange. The hunter's hour. Inside the farmhouse, the world had shrunk to the space between the shuttered windows. The air was thick with tension, smelling of antiseptic, old wood, and the faint metallic tang of the AR-15 in Cole's hands. He's arrogant, Cole said, his voice low, directed at Jenna but also to himself, analyzing the enemy. Donovan. He's been the boss too long. He won't delegate this to just his guys, not after they failed once. He'll come himself. Jenna was propped against the headboard, her face pale, but her eyes were clear. The horror had been replaced by a cold, hard anger. There were two others, she said, Slater, the one who looks like a block of ice, and Gable, the one who always looks like he's about to puke. They were at the impound lot. He'll bring them, Cole said. And at least one more. 4, counting him. They'll wait for full dark, thinking it gives them the advantage. He moved to the front door and knelt, his hands working quickly in the gloom. He unspooled a length of high-test climbing rope from Mac's gear, stretching it taut across the entryway, 2 inches off the floor. He attached one end to a heavy bolt in the wall and the other to a precariously balanced stack of Mac's cast iron skillets. It won't stop them. It'll just tell me where they are. He handed Jenna a spare magazine. Can you load this? She nodded, her hands clumsy but determined, pressing the rounds into the cold metal. Good, Cole said. Stay in the bedroom. Stay low and away from the door. Judge stays with you. The shepherd whined, his eyes fixed on Cole. No, boy, Cole commanded, his voice a low, firm whisper. Watch her. Watch her. Your job is Jenna. The dog, understanding the command to guard, backed into the bedroom and sat by the bed, his body rigid, his gaze fixed on the main room of the farmhouse. Cole moved to the back of the house, to the small window in the kitchen. He slid it open just a crack, letting in the damp, cold air, and he waited. The assault came at 6:17 p.m., not with a shout, but with a thud and a sharp metallic clang from the front porch. The tripwire. They were at the door. Cole, Jenna hissed. Stay down, he ordered. He didn't move forward. He moved sideways, into the deep shadows of the living room, his weapon centered on the heart of the farmhouse. Heavy footsteps on the porch. Then, a massive kick to the oak door. The crossbar held. Another kick. The wood groaned. Haynes, take the window. A voice barked from outside. It was Slater. A fraction of a second later, a rifle butt shattered the kitchen window Cole had left unlocked. A man rolled through, dressed in tactical black. This was Haynes, a new face built like a fire hydrant, moving with professional speed. But Cole was already there. Haynes was expecting a man at the front door. He wasn't expecting a shadow 2 feet to his left. Cole didn't fire. He used the butt of his rifle in a silent, brutal arc, connecting with the man just below the ear. Haynes crumpled without a sound. One down. Breach. 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 Slater roared from the front, thinking the noise was Cole. The front door exploded inward as Slater and another man, a pale-faced Gable, stormed through. They were met with an empty room. Where is he? Gable yelled, his voice cracking with panic, his pistol wavering. He's in the dark, Slater growled, taking a knee, his own rifle sweeping the room. But Cole wasn't in the farmhouse anymore. The moment they breached the front, he had vaulted through the back window where Haynes had entered, rolling into the wet leaves and the blackness of the backyard. He was a ghost. He was outside, and they were trapped inside. He moved silently along the wall of the farmhouse. He's in the bedroom, Slater yelled, seeing the light under the door. He and Gable advanced, firing a deafening volley into the wooden door. No. Jenna screamed from inside. And then, from the front porch, a fourth figure stepped through the broken doorway, framed by the dying light. He was older, wearing a tactical vest over his uniform, his service pistol raised. It was Captain Frank Donovan. He had come himself, just as Cole predicted. He's not in there, you fools, Donovan snarled, his eyes sweeping the room. He flanked us. Slater, the back. Gable, with me. Find the girl. Slater spun and ran toward the kitchen. Gable, trying to comply, ran to the bedroom window on the side of the farmhouse, trying to get an angle. I see her. I see the girl. Gable shouted, raising his pistol. Inside the bedroom, Judge heard the threat. With a roar that was more lion than dog, he launched his 90-pound body through the glass window. A horrifying explosion of fur and fury. He hit Gable square in the chest, knocking the man backward into the muddy yard. Gable's gun went off, the round flying wild as Judge's jaws clamped down on his arm. The gunshot and Judge's attack masked Cole's movement. He rounded the corner, his rifle up. Slater was just emerging from the kitchen, turning to fire at the sound. He and Cole saw each other at the same instant. Slater got off a quick, well-aimed shot. A round tore through the meat of Cole's left shoulder, a white-hot poker that spun him around. Cole roared, his knees buckling, but his training took over. He felt no pain. He went down, firing a controlled 3-round burst from the ground. The shots hit Slater's center mass. The man's vest took the impact, but the kinetic force threw him off his feet, his head slamming against the farmhouse wall. He slid to the ground, unmoving. 2 down. Cole rolled, ignoring the fire in his shoulder. Gable was on the ground, screaming, trying to fight off Judge. 3 down. He fought his way to his feet, his left arm useless, the rifle held one-handed. He staggered back to the front porch. Inside, in the center of the dark, wrecked living room, stood one man, Captain Frank Donovan. He wasn't looking at Cole. He was staring at the bedroom doorway where Jenna had just emerged, her face a mask of rage. "Frank!" she screamed. Donovan turned, his face a snarl of hatred. He raised his pistol, not at Cole, but at her. "You should have taken the deal, kid." "No." Cole roared. But he was too far, his shoulder was on fire. Donovan was the only threat left. Time stopped. The living room was a tableau of chaos, frozen in the dim light. The acrid smell of cordite hung in the air, mixed with the scent of rain and wet pine. Cole stood in the ruined doorway, his left arm a dead, numb weight, blood dripping from his fingers onto the porch. The rifle felt impossibly heavy in his one good hand. Inside, Frank Donovan stood over Slater's body, his chest heaving, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. He looked at the bodies of his men. Haynes in the kitchen, Slater at his feet, Gable screaming from the yard where Judge still had him pinned, and his mind finally, truly broke. The illusion of the venerable captain shattered, leaving only the cornered animal. He saw Jenna framed in the bedroom doorway, her eyes wide, her entire body trembling. She was the cause. She was the loose thread that had unraveled his entire life. With a guttural roar of pure fury, Donovan launched himself forward. He crossed the living room in 2 strides, grabbing a fistful of Jenna's hair and her wounded arm. She cried out as he yanked her from the doorway, spinning her around to use her as a human shield. He pressed the hot muzzle of his pistol to her temple, his other arm locked like a steel bar across her throat. "Drop it, soldier," Donovan snarled, his voice trembling. He began to drag her backward, away from Cole, toward the relative safety of the kitchen. "Drop the rifle or her brains go on the wall. Now." Cole didn't move. He stood, his feet planted, the rifle still pointed at the floor. His shoulder was a screaming, white-hot agony that was secondary to the cold, tactical calculation running through his head. He had no shot. She was covering 80% of Donovan's body, and Donovan's head was tucked tight behind hers. A rifle round would pass through her and still kill him, but that wasn't an option. "I said, drop it," Donovan yelled, pressing the gun so hard into Jenna's temple she cried out. "It's over, Captain," Cole said, his voice a low, calm counterpoint to Donovan's panic. He deliberately didn't look at the gun. He looked only into Donovan's eyes. "Your men are down. You're compromised. There's no way off this property." "Shut up. You think this is a negotiation?" Donovan laughed. A high, crazed sound. "You with your fancy gear and your training. You're just like her father. Arrogant. So sure you're on the side of the angels." He tightened his grip, cutting off Jenna's air. "Her father was a fool, too. He got sloppy. I told him to back off, but he wouldn't listen. Just like her." Jenna, despite the pain and terror, had stopped struggling. Her eyes, wide and watering, were locked on Cole. She wasn't pleading for her life. She was trying. She was trusting him. "You did this," Donovan spat, his eyes darting between Cole and the dark woods outside. "This was done. It was a simple accident. But you had to play the hero. You had to save her. Now you get to watch her die. You get to live with that. Just like I had to live with her father's judgment." Cole knew there was no de-escalation. Donovan was going for suicide by cop, but he was taking Jenna with him. He had no way out, and he knew it. This was the end game. "Let her go, Frank," Cole said, his voice soft. He let the rifle dip another inch. "Let her go and I'll let you walk out of here." "My word." Donovan just laughed. "Your word?" The word of a man who hides in the shadows? You're not a soldier. You're a coward. The words were barely out of his mouth. From the shadows of the front porch, a new shape emerged, silent as fog. Judge. He had subdued Gable, and hearing the new threats, had circled back. He was low, his belly nearly to the floorboards, his eyes locked on the man herding his new pack. He looked at Cole, his head low, waiting. Donovan, blinded by his own rage and focused on Cole, didn't see him. Cole's eyes met Donovan's. He slowly, deliberately raised his wounded left hand in a gesture of surrender. You're right, Frank. You win. As his hand came up, Cole tapped his index finger twice on his own chest, and then with an almost imperceptible movement, pointed that same finger directly at Frank Donovan. It was a K-9 attack command. A designated target. Judge exploded from the darkness. He wasn't a pet. He was a weapon. He launched his 90-pound frame across the 10 feet separating the porch from the kitchen. A silent, sable missile. He didn't bark. He didn't go for the throat. He went for the threat. His jaws, with over 1,000 pounds of pressure, clamped down on Frank Donovan's right arm. The sound was horrific. A wet, definitive crack as teeth met bone. Donovan screamed. A sound of pure, unadulterated agony. His body convulsed in shock, his pistol firing. The round went harmlessly into the ceiling, the blast deafening in the small room. His grip on Jenna went slack as his entire body arched in pain, his arm shattered. The instant the gun fired, Cole moved. He dropped the rifle. He ignored the fire in his shoulder. He launched forward, a one-arm tackle, driving his good right shoulder squarely into Donovan's chest. The combined force of the SEAL's charge and the dog's weight sent them both flying backward. Jenna was thrown clear, collapsing to the floor. Cole and Donovan went down in a heap with Judge still attached to the captain's arm. The fight was over. Donovan was sobbing, his body limp, his will to fight completely erased by the pain. Cole, his knee on the man's chest, his good hand grabbing the shattered, useless wrist, wrenched the pistol away. He kicked it across the floor. Judge, he commanded. Out. The dog released instantly, backing away, his chest rumbling, blood on his muzzle. Cole didn't move. He stayed there, his full weight pressing down on the broken, weeping man. The farmhouse was suddenly, profoundly silent, broken only by Donovan's sobs, Jenna's gasps from the floor, and the drip of Cole's own blood onto the face of the man who had started it all. The siege was broken. The battle was won. The silence that fell over the farmhouse was absolute, heavier and more profound than any storm. It was broken by a single, ragged gasp from Jenna, who was still on the floor, staring at the man who had been her mentor. Frank Donovan was whimpering, a high, thin sound of agony, his broken arm held at an unnatural angle. Cole got to his feet, his good arm taking his full weight. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain in his shoulder was a roaring, blinding fire. He ignored it. He went into the bedroom, retrieved a set of zip cuffs from his tactical bag, and returned to Donovan. He cinched the man's wrists, securing him. Then he went to Gable, who was still on the ground outside, Judge's teeth marks clearly visible on his arm. He cuffed him, too. Slater and Haynes were beyond his help. He returned to the farmhouse, his movement stiff. Jenna hadn't moved. Jenna, he said, his voice softer than he intended. Jenna, it's over. She looked up, her eyes slowly focusing on him, on the blood on his arm, on the broken men. He killed my father, didn't he? She whispered. I don't know, Cole said honestly. But we're going to find out. He moved past the stacked boxes of Max Life and pulled a small, rugged olive drab case from his bag, a satellite phone. He powered it on. Are you calling 911? Jenna asked, her voice hollow. How? How do we know who to trust? Cole shook his head, working the antenna with one hand. We don't call them. We call the people they listen to. He dialed a number from memory. After 3 rings, a gruff, sleepy voice answered. This is Warren. I'm at Mac Connolly's farmhouse. Yeah, that one. I have a situation. Multiple hostiles down. All APD, 1 Kia, 2 wounded. I have 1 friendly officer down and I'm wounded myself. The hostiles are local Leos, including Captain Frank Donovan. Requesting state police, SRT, and medevac. The area is not secure. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Who's the senior officer, Warren? Captain Frank Donovan, Cole repeated. Confirmed, the voice said, suddenly awake and all business. I'll make the call. ETR is 60 minutes. Keep the line open if you can. And Warren, be careful. Cole closed the phone. State police are on the way, he said. Be here by dawn. He looked at her. Now we wait. The next 4 hours were the longest of their lives. Cole became the caretaker again. He got the first aid kit and with his one good arm, went to work, first on Jenna. He had to check the tourniquet. This is gonna hurt, he warned. She just nodded, her face pale, her jaw set. He did the controlled reperfusion, and this time she didn't scream. She just closed her eyes tight, her body trembling. He redressed the wound, his movements economical. Then, he sat on the floor and pulled his shirt off his own shoulder. It was A through and through. The bullet had passed cleanly. He disinfected it, packed the wounds, and tightly wrapped a pressure dressing around his shoulder, his teeth clenched. Jenna watched him, her voice small. You never told me your first name. Not really. Cole, he said, his voice strained with pain. Just Cole. Thank you, Cole, she whispered. You and him. She looked at Judge, who had finally left his post and was now lying with his head on her good leg. We take care of our own, Cole said simply. He sat in the chair opposite her, the AR-15 across his lap, his gaze fixed on the broken front door. And they waited for the sun. Dawn came slowly, a watercolor wash of pale gray and rose filtering through the trees. With it came the sound of heavy trucks on the gravel road and the whump-whump-whump of a different kind of helicopter, an official, heavy-bellied Blackhawk. A team of 6 men in the green uniforms of the Michigan State Police Tactical Team fanned out, their weapons up, moving with practiced efficiency. A man in a captain's uniform, tall and severe, with a face like it was carved from granite, stepped onto the porch. He saw Cole, the rifle, the blood, and the cuffed officers. Captain Miller, State Police, the man announced. Son, you've had a busy night. They came for her, Cole said, nodding toward Jenna as medics rushed in. Captain Donovan led them. As they were loading Jenna onto a stretcher, she grabbed Captain Miller's arm. Sir, she said, her voice urgent. He'll deny it. The proof. It's not on me. It's at my apartment. 412B. Taped. Taped under the sink. A thumb drive. It's everything. Captain Miller's eyes sharpened. He looked from her to the weeping, defeated Donovan. I understand, officer. We'll secure it. He turned to Cole. You're coming too, son. You're a material witness, and you need a hospital. The dog comes, Cole said. It wasn't a request. Miller looked at Judge, at the blood on his muzzle and his steady, protective gaze. The dog comes, he agreed. The next few months were a blur of hospitals, physical therapy, and internal investigations. Jenna's leg was saved. The surgeons, amazed at Cole's precise field care, said the tourniquet and the controlled reperfusions were textbook, the only reason she was still walking. The graze wound healed, but the deeper wounds, the betrayal, took longer. Cole's shoulder healed, leaving a clean, puckered scar. The thumb drive was the key. Jenna's video, combined with Donovan's confession, brought down an entire criminal enterprise that had been rotting the police department from the inside for a decade. The revelation that Donovan had, in fact, arranged the accident that killed Jenna's father years earlier rocked the town. Jenna, from her hospital bed, became an unwilling hero, the symbol of a new, unbuyable force. Through it all, Cole and Judge were the constants. Cole sat by her bed, reading from Mac's tattered copy of Moby Dick, his low, steady voice cutting through the beeping of the hospital machines. Judge lay at the foot of her bed. His presence a silent, furry promise of safety. They were a pack of 3. A soldier searching for a purpose beyond the next deployment. A cop whose faith had been shattered, and a dog who had lost his first master. In that quiet, sterile room, they found a new one. They found each other. It was spring, 6 months later. The woods were alive, the pale green of new leaves replacing the grim gray of winter. The farmhouse was repaired. The broken door was replaced with new oak. The bullet holes were patched. The boxes were gone, sorted and stored. Jenna stood on the porch, leaning only slightly on a cane. She breathed in the crisp, clean air, smelling not of cordite but of pine and damp earth. Cole stood beside her, his now fully healed arm resting lightly on her shoulders. Judge lay at their feet, basking in a patch of morning sun. It's so quiet, Jenna said. It's home, Cole replied. She looked at him. The intensity in his eyes was still there, but the haunted, grieving look was gone. It was replaced by a deep, settled calm. Your leave is almost up, isn't it? She asked, her voice quiet. It is, he said. I put in my papers last week. I'm resigning my commission. Jenna turned to face him, her eyes wide. Cole, you can't. The teams. That's your life, your family. He shook his head, his hand moving from her shoulder to cup her face. They were, but this is. He gestured to the woods, to the farmhouse, to the dog at their feet. Mac left me this farmhouse, but I was just a ghost here, cleaning up another ghost's life. Then the storm hit. He looked into her eyes, the dark honey color he'd first seen in the beam of his flashlight. That night, fighting for you, I felt more alive, more right, than I have in a decade. I'm done fighting ghosts on the other side of the world, Jenna. I want to build something right here, with you. Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of relief, of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. She leaned forward and he met her halfway. Their kiss was gentle, not one of desperate survival, but of promise, of a life to be built from the wreckage. So, she whispered against his lips. What do we do now? Cole smiled, pulling her close, his good arm wrapping around her. Now, he said, we take the dog for a walk, and then I'm going to fix that leaky roof. Judge barked, as if in agreement, and the three of them, a new family forged in a storm, stepped off the porch and into the bright, promising Michigan sunlight.